So I wanted to do a response to a video put out by the This Matters group, which is titled, "Is Racism a Mental Health Issue?" This is a hot topic because there is so much race baiting in the mainstream media. Most people want to see justice and equality in society. They are pushing a narrative that racism is a mental disorder, likened to post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, and that it is exclusive to white people. So let's just get this one out of the way from the very beginning. Racism isn't limited to white people. Maybe there are some ultra-indoctrinated kids out there who haven't had enough life experience yet to remove this misconception. With a little discernment and intellectual honesty, we can appreciate the broadness of racial prejudice. This really shouldn't need any further explanation. Straight off the bat, we see a white woman blowing a gasket at some staff in a fast food restaurant. She has been on the receiving end of some bad service. Her complaint is that the staff have gotten something wrong which she feels they should have gotten right in the first place.
This is America, and you get it right the first time. You get it right the first time. Get it right the first time. Get it right the first time, okay?
What if racism was a mental health issue?
There's not enough video to get the full context or even see clearly the race of the staff involved, or even if this is actually a racially charged situation. It is important to understand why this woman has been chosen. They are using her erratic state to anchor the narrative that racism is indeed a mental disorder and plant the notion that white people are the perpetrators of racism into the psyche of the audience. What is also of note is that the woman is reasonably well presented. Perhaps she is middle class. Her social status is saying that here is a well-groomed functioning member of society, but she is also mentally unstable and racist. Oh, see how white racism is neatly woven into the fabric of society. Next, then, the video shows some historic footage of a soldier with PTSD. He is lunging towards another soldier. Here, the second image is also being used to cement the same idea that racism is a mental disorder.
I mean, think about it. Racists suffer from their own kind of PTSD.
Race and racism is an interesting topic. There are different levels of race awareness. One type of consciousness is your garden variety racist who is prejudiced based on racial difference and is unable to process his or her emotions. They feel compelled to vent their frustrations at their perceived threat.
Their symptoms include agitation,
Terrorist fucking cocksucker,
and irritability,
got immigration papers? Fucking cockroach.
hostility,
Go back to wherever the fuck you come from, lady.
hypervigilance,
Don't you hate when you're inside a store and the cashier starts following you like, she think I'm stealing, look.
social isolation,
Fucking lazy monkeys. Maybe the 10th one I've seen in my life too.
Another type of individual in the race discussion is your articulate racialist who identifies with his or her specific racial traits acquired through their inherent nature. To equate racism with PTSD may have some validity, as people from different backgrounds have been traumatized by negative experiences at the hands of a person of a different color or race. The video goes on to show some heated people venting their spleens. It's not pretty. The full video clips are not there, but we get the gist, and it is ugly. No one likes to see that. No one likes conflict. I'll cut some slack to the shopkeeper who is shadowing the teenager. Perhaps she has experienced a high volume of theft from her store from black kids, and we may never know. In the same vein, it's hard not to have sympathy for the teenager who is obviously getting continuously negatively profiled. Next, the video starts to get dishonest. After we see the various outbursts, the video cuts to Tomi Lahren and Richard Spencer. Tomi Lahren is reacting to the well-covered US election meltdowns from the left, while Richard Spencer is addressing his group members and offering a glass in the air in a toast to Donald Trump's presidential victory.
Clearly liberals aren't the only ones that are triggered. But by
Let's
what?
get something straight. A bunch of sore losers occupying a space is called a tantrum, and that's exactly what we're seeing around the nation after Trump's historic and earned victory.
Hail Trump! Hail victory!
The video is trying to lump both types of race-conscious people into the same box. That is, your basic racist and your articulate racialist. This is a cheap shot, and it's dishonest. Tomi Lahren's clip is merely a left-right narrative, and not a conversation on race. Although Richard Spencer's shouting out, "Hail Trump" could be associated with Hitler, and there is a person in the crowd throwing a Nazi salute. Richard Spencer is not the person throwing a Nazi salute, and there has been talk that this salute was some trolling aimed at the mainstream media who were present at the event. To equate Tomi Lahren and Richard Spencer with the earlier examples does nothing to foster a conducive environment for dialogue, which is an inferred desire in the video. Next we have more falsehood. Firstly, the notion that the US is traumatized by its origins in slavery and genocide. And secondly, that society hasn't become more just and equal since gains in the civil rights movement. The video tries to establish this understanding by showing a news report of law enforcement using excessive force on a black child resulting in his death. This is being used to exact the emotion of outrage from the viewer in an attempt to add weight to their claim, said that we don't have justice or equality in society today.
Well, the United States is traumatized by its origins in slavery and genocide. And that trauma hasn't ended. We were taught in school that because of some brave people's sacrifices, that our society has become more and more just and equal over time. Has it?
The Cleveland Police Department is now responding to a wrongful death lawsuit by blaming a 12-year-old boy for his own death.
However, this is not what we see in the US nor in Western society as a whole. In the US before the Civil Rights Movement, with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, and after with affirmative action and anti-discrimination laws. Next we are offered the statistic that 1 in 15 black men are incarcerated. This statistic is on a split screen which shows a black woman picking cotton in period dress. The message here is that slavery never really went away, rather it just changed its venue from the cotton fields to the prison system. This is a topic, in and of itself. Perhaps we can save it for another day. What I will say is that, if you want to talk about modern day slavery, you need look no further than the slavery of the debt-based monetary system. This financial system doesn't discriminate on color. The only color it sees is green.
Slavery ended, but today 1 in 15 black men are incarcerated, many in private prisons where they perform labor for pennies.
Now with this next segment I'm starting to wonder if the intention of the video is just to stir up animosity. If you genuinely want dialogue, you have to do the groundwork to instill trust in the people with whom you want to engage with. And here, they have not done that. The clip in question is a 10-second snippet from the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota, which tries to claim that colonization is still a thing because, well, water cannons. The other side of the argument in regards to Standing Rock is that the locals there were initially offered $56 million for access and usage of their land for the pipeline. But the locals got greedy and tried to get more. At this point the oil company decided to route their pipeline through the adjacent land belonging to the Army Corps engineers. When the locals realized that they were not going to get a dime, they protested the pipeline, trespassed on private land, and the rest is history. So here we have lazy reporting at best, and they are hoping that their audience is lazy too.
Hi. We thought we were done colonizing native lands, but, Standing Rock proves otherwise.
And everyone's just trying to help each other out and survive.
Right. I'm not even going to give this next one much airtime at all, because the argument is the cheesiest ever. In fact, they really don't offer any argument. They suggest that Donald Trump would put the Muslim population of the US into internment camps as was exacted upon Japanese Americans in World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor. How on earth did they come to that conclusion?
We apologize for interning Japanese Americans, but it seems like Trump would like to do the same thing to Muslim Americans.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. Islam hates us.
Was it because of Trump's execution of the so-called Muslim ban list that was conceived of by the Obama administration? Really, all this video is achieving at this point is to further polarize its audience, pushing a political agenda that the left is good and the right is evil, that the left is moral and the right is racist. The bullshit is in full flow now, as they try to deconstruct the narrative that progress has been made in the US. Their proposal is that the traditional view of a progressive march through history towards freedom is merely a fluffy substitute for the hard reality that the US is a nation of traumatized racists.
We've coped with these contradictions by describing history as a march towards freedom, because the reality is too painful to face. The reality is that our racial history doesn't tell a story of progress, but of PTSD. And every new racist episode is like a flashback.
In an attempt to prove this, they show a video clip of an old wise woman on the Oprah show telling us that the UN in 1959 determined racism as the #1 mental health issue in American children. Well, bugger me sideways, if the UN said it, it must be true.
Racism was defined by the President's Joint Council on Mental Health in Children in 1959 as being the #1 mental health problem among children in the United States.
The basic approach in this video is to give a dog a bad name and hang it. They are inferring that protecting your borders and controlling immigration is racist and xenophobic. Their minds are already made up, and I'll let you into a secret. They don't really want a conversation. Now we come to the solutions part of their video, but don't get your hopes up too high, as on closer inspection we detect an undercurrent of ridicule cloaked in a veil of compassion. The concept of white fragility is presented here. White fragility is a term coined by multicultural academic Robin DiAngelo, and it is used in connection with white privilege. For DiAngelo, white privilege is described as an unstable racial equilibrium which, when destabilized, creates anxiety which, in turn, will trigger a defensive response. I want to make it clear here for later reference that the white fragility that has been presented here by DiAngelo relates specifically to the defensive responses of white people who struggle to adjust to changes in their status quo. Why is this important, you may ask? Well, as we will see in the next segment, they are trying to blur the lines and shift the definition of white fragility by showing an emotionally fragile woman who is overwhelmed upon discovering that her DNA breakdown is 15% sub-Saharan African, 5% indigenous American, and 80% European. They don't overtly announce the shift in broadening their use of the term white fragility because the pictures do that all by themselves. Again, there's not enough video footage to get the full context. The goal here is to build their narrative portraying white people as fragile, especially when they discover they are not 100% white.
So am I just saying that people who demand racist and xenophobic agendas are just mentally ill? Yeah, but that doesn't let them off the hook. We can hold alcoholics accountable for drunk driving while still encouraging them to seek help. We can hold veterans with PTSD accountable for domestic violence while still sympathizing with their painful condition. And we can hold racists accountable. We need to hold racists accountable for their actions and their violence at the same time that we try to treat and heal our country's racist affliction. So let's talk about solutions. Well, first off, starting conversations about race and racism is not enough. Robin DiAngelo describes white fragility as defensiveness about race.
I'm 15% sub-Saharan African and 80% European. Wow.
You may think that I'm trying to read too much into this clip until we look at the next segment. The next segment, which is an image of a lecture theater with a tweet tweeting that students were walking out of a lecture when told that all living people have descended from Africans. So the same idea is being pushed again like dodgy smack. I shouldn't have to explain that your classic lecture format is that of a professor speaking and the student listening and taking notes. It is not a conversation, debate, or dialogue format. So this clip is not a good example to demonstrate avoidance of racial conversation.
Running away. So even if we want to have a conversation, we're not going to get one.
Next, we are going to get talked down to by our presenter, who, after falsely claiming that conversation on race is tonight, proceeds to try to frame Matt Damon's heated discussion as an example of shutting down conversation. His assertion is that the film director's competition in question should be judged purely on merit, rather than on any other consideration.
That denial looks like arguing.
When we're talking about diversity, you do it in the casting of the film, not in the casting of the show.
Whew. Wow, okay.
What an evil bastard that Matt Damon is with all his white friends sitting on cozy couches. Such privilege. What white supremacy. If you've not seen the exchange with Matt Damon, I'll include link in the notes. When the whole video is viewed, it is evident that there has been a thorough discussion. Next, silencing is promoted as a tactic used to shut down conversation. The example here is an exchange which took place on US presidential election night between Van Jones and Corey Lewandowski. This short exchange has been spliced and diced like an Italian salad to fit the desired narrative.
Silencing.
This is so egregious that it would be so outrageous that, you know what's the George Costanza, that's what he would be called.
Corey, you're being a horrible person right now. Let me finish.
If this was Donald...
Lewandowski was understandably pumped after Hillary Clinton had just been checked directly into the Smackdown hotel just off Jabroni Drive. The fact that the liberal contributor was black is incidental, but they would like you to think otherwise. When we see the full clip and a link is in the notes, we see that both parties are given a voice. The subject matter between Van and Corey isn't even about race, it's about Hillary Clinton's failure to address the nation after being defeated on election night. They are really struggling to find accurate examples to back their arguments. Solutions. Next, the psychological therapy known as exposure therapy is suggested. Exposure therapy is a therapy which helps people deal with, reduce, and even eradicate trauma-based anxieties. In this therapy, a conducive environment is created where any danger that might cause a rapid escalation in trauma to manifest is removed. I'll include an example of exposure therapy below. It is relevant at this point to emphasize that the essential element for successful exposure therapy is maintaining a non-combative, non-confrontational environment, without which the trauma therapy will not be successful. The most disingenuous part of their video is that they now do a quick switcheroo, a sleight of hand, a cheap bait, and switch maneuver. They now twist everything and present the protester activist as the victim, and the PTSD racist becomes the perpetrator who needs to be confronted head-on.
Therapists employ exposure therapy, controlled ways to confront the trauma rather than avoiding reminders of it. We need to face it and each other head-on. So let's take lessons from psychotherapy to heal through protest. What that means, we have to revisit the trauma.
Protesters gather to create signs and assemble a symbolic funeral service in March in memory of 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was shot and killed by a Cleveland police officer.
We have to speak about it explicitly over and over again.
Say her name! India Bar! Say her name! India Bar! Say her name! India Bar!
We have to confront all these distressing situations. Because racism will always repeat until we interrupt it.
What happened to the non-combative approach of exposure therapy offered only moments earlier? Let's make this crystal clear. The so-called PTSD racists, who they probably think is everyone who voted for Donald Trump, have now become the object of head-to-head confrontation, and the activists become the victims, who need to heal through protest and through revisiting the trauma of the victims of racism. This really is low-level gaslighting. You claim that you want conversation and you feign compassion for people you ideologically disagree with. Your video is a farce, from top to bottom. You don't want conversation, and you don't want healing, you want conflict.
We need you to be strong, not fragile. That means not letting your uncle or friends off the hook for their racism. You wouldn't abandon them if they had a mental illness. What I'm saying is uncomfortable, and it'll likely get pretty ugly. But confronting them is how you help them. We have to stop thinking of racism as a formal position. This person is racist, that thing is racist. It's a pathology, and it values white lives over others. Share this video. Take everyone you know that suffers from the same condition. This matters.
If you can't be honest with yourself or in your arguments, then you can't expect discerning people to engage you in dialogue. All the judgmental, derisive, arrogant, intolerant and condescending qualities in your video are the very qualities you will find in your basic low IQ racist. So you tell me, who's the racist? See you on the next one.